certainly one of those. Among other things, she is known to be an expert on corporate clubs. She is a DTM and the 2010-2011 International President of Toastmasters International. As the only Canadian woman to serve as Toastmasters International President, she has demonstrated her ability to stand out, and she has published a handbook for building and sustaining vibrant Toastmasters corporate clubs. Have you checked your audio, Pat?
Yes, thank you.
Have you pinned the timer?
I have.
Thank you. With a title, Build and Sustain Toastmasters in the Corporate Environment, the Roles We Play. Please welcome Pat Johnson.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, for inviting me, and thank you so much for District 71 and your hospitality. I want to acknowledge our District Director, Gerard, and past International President, Ted Corcoran, who are in the audience, as well as any other past district leaders and international leaders. It's my pleasure today to share with you a few ideas, and my presentation today is just a casual conversation, like a fireside chat, just before we go to sing song with Ted. So I want to talk about our roles that we play regarding corporate. When we have Toastmasters in the corporate environment, how do we support them? How do we actually get to know about them? How do we help meet their needs? And then how do we continue to support them? So I want to look at this from the perspective of us each being leaders in our Toastmasters program, leaders of ourselves and leaders in our district, and how can we move this forward? Well, first of all, I think one of the most important roles that we play is to know our audience. And we heard this already from Samir, and we also heard from Philip in a different way in terms of speaking and needing to know who the audience is and connecting with them so that you come across that they get something from the presentation. This is the same thing when we go to the corporate world to talk about the Toastmasters educational program and what we actually offer them. So when part of knowing our audience is to understand the language that they speak, not the language we speak in Toastmasters, because we have a whole book full of jargon that we use extensively, and most people don't know what we're talking about. It's really important that we translate our language into the language of our audience, and that's into corporate speak. So there's some basics, and I've written about this in my book, but just to give you some examples for those of you that may not have heard it before, talk about tuition rather than dues when you go to the corporation. Or you could even be doing this in a government environment. It would run the same way. And perhaps university or colleges if you're working with the faculty. So this would be relevant there as well. So talk about tuition so that they understand that they're actually paying for their education that they're going to take from Toastmasters. And that's where it's going towards, is for their education. Talk about the curriculum that we offer. I, for the most part, don't talk about pathways. Pathways doesn't mean anything to most people. But when you talk about curriculum, when they're going to join a group to get some education, then it makes sense. So there's those very simple things that if we get in the mindset of being in the corporate environment, we can know our audience and understand them. One of the things that I've started doing over the years is when I go on corporate visits, is that I assume that I know nothing about the corporation. I think it's dangerous to assume that we know lots about the corporation and what we're going to do to make their life better. I would rather assume that I don't know much about their organization And I go in with a lot of questions. So when I first meet with someone in the corporate world, I want to know, how do you run your program training in your corporation? How do your employees actually access education programs? Do you offer them in-house, or do people have to go after hours to attend professional training and development? Do they have a training department that issues a calendar or perhaps a list of programs on their intranet? How do they publish it? How do people enroll? Do people self-select to take programs, or do they need to be put forward by their supervisors? Do they have such tight security within their corporation that they cannot access external programs? So for example, our curriculum would be online, and so they may need to remove a firewall or to make some exception in order for the participants within the Toastmasters program to access the curriculum. So those are just foundational basic questions that I start with. I want to know if they pay for the training. If they have an employee that wants to take project management, do they pay for that program, or do they require their employees to pay for that? Do they give their employees time during work hours to attend project management training, or do they require that they do it on their own time? So where I'm looking is, what is the training policies and practices in this organization that I'm approaching, or we're approaching, in order to talk about Toastmasters? So what's the purpose of this? Because I don't want to ask a question unless I'm going to use the information. The information tells me how they're going to embrace the Toastmasters program and how we can actually place it in that corporation. If they pay for their employees to go to training and they hold them during the day, during the workday, that is exactly what I'm asking them to do with the Toastmasters program in that environment. Is that we're going to take our curriculum, place it in their care, and they are going to offer it on Mondays at 3 o'clock for 1 hour, for example. They may pay for it up front, or they may, as their practice is, reimburse it upon successful completion, which brings up another whole interesting discussion. Where do we ever have completion in Toastmasters? So we may want to talk about length of time and renewals. So I won't go down that track at the moment, just looking at knowing the audience and how they can implement it. So the next thing I want to talk to them about is that how they would actually send people to a program. In their organization, as I said, do the supervisors and managers decide who goes to a training program, or can Pat raise her hand as that employee and say, I would like to take the Toastmasters program, and then the supervisor manager signs it off and sends me to it? So how does that work? Once I find that, again, then I let them know that it's the responsibility of that organization to ensure, their responsibility, not ours, their responsibility to ensure that the program we're bringing in-house has a minimum of 25 to 30 people in it at all times. What this does is really change the paradigm for those of us that are used to doing everything for Toastmasters. And the shift is to partner with the corporation, partner with that government agency, so that they can implement the curriculum into their structure, and it becomes another program that's listed in their calendar of program training events. A couple of things that I also change in terms of wording when I'm talking to the corporation. I don't talk about Toastmaster meetings. Most people in the corporation are not wanting to sign up for more meetings. And most corporations don't want to pay for their employees to go to more meetings. So I call them learning sessions. And as time goes on and we talk about it more, then I drop the learning and I talk about the sessions, the Toastmaster sessions. It's much more palatable in that corporate environment than putting another meeting on the agenda on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. It helps the supervisors and managers. It helps the people in the organization recognize that they're actually at a training event, not at a meeting that can be canceled or that you can get pulled out of, but that you're actually at an authorized training event. So I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time talking about that preliminary part, but I'll just say really get to know your audience and speak their language. I want to talk a bit about the transferable skills that we need to translate for the corporate world, whether you're rebuilding or you're building a club in that environment. Because again, we need to look at how can we meet the needs? Why would they actually sign up as a corporation to buy our curriculum or bring our curriculum in-house if we don't meet their needs? So most training departments, in my experience, have training needs assessments. And this is often a survey that's done once a year or maybe once every 2 years in a corporation to identify what kind of training do their employees actually need to be effective and be professional in doing their job. This material is often contained in the training department or in human resources somewhere. Again, depends on how the corporation's put together. But if they have a training department, then that's where I would start. So we want to talk about, in addition to finding out how they do things, I want to ask them about their training needs and then listen to them. So I spend a fair amount of time listening in this first meeting. But when we start talking about transferable skills, it's really important to make it in language that they relate to, things that apply to their environment. So for example, what would we call table topics in a corporate environment if you were at work? And you can just write in the chat you might have chat locked, do you? If you can open up chat for me, please. And what might you call table topics if you didn't use the Toastmasters term and it was applying to a corporate environment? Thanks for opening up chat. What might you call table topics? What's the transferable skill to the corporation? Okay, impromptu speaking. Thanks, Heidi. Off the cuff, that might work as well. Yes. We can also talk about, interviewing skills. It certainly relates to interviewing skills. Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing those ideas. It may also lead to interpersonal communication, which is another growing need in the workplace. Not long ago, I had a conversation with one of the districts. We were meeting with Microsoft, and one of their learning coordinators with Microsoft had a conversation. And I said to the coordinator, why does Microsoft want Toastmasters? What's your training need that we can provide? And he said, every employee in Microsoft needs interpersonal communication skills. And I said, we are the perfect match for you. He said, I know, that's why I'm talking with you. So it's finding out what they need and how we meet it. So we have impromptu speaking or interpersonal communication skills. We have formal presentation skills, on the other hand. So there'll be those opportunities at work where you have to get up and you have to present at a large meeting, or perhaps you're even representing the organization at a conference or a professional group or into the community, depending again on the role, but you learn to present. Now, we have an added skill, transferable skill from this past year, is that we do a lot of online practicing. And as a result, we've all established a fair amount of skill in presenting online, which again is a transferable for that environment that will remain relevant for quite a while. So we've got those formal presentations, we've got those impromptu and interpersonal communications. We've got leadership training. Now, one of the things that I know as a result of running a learning and development department is that leadership skills are very expensive to buy. They often are rolled up in a package of a week away in some beautiful hotel and full meals and all the benefits. And that's not necessarily leadership training. It is, but it's at a huge cost. Often it's got a fancy price tag to it, and very few people get to go to it. There may be, if you have an organization that's a real learning organization, they may send 5 or 10 people a year to something like that. But again, what happens to the people that aren't at that high level that are getting sent to those expensive programs? So we're looking at those leadership skills. Now, the difference that happens here with our leadership skills and our leadership training is that it is experiential. And this is what we really want to talk about with them in terms of we learn by doing and getting feedback from one another and from people that have been there and done more than us. And we get to get some information and then we go away and we practice it. See, I believe that the secret sauce in enrolling people into Toastmasters is when they find out that we are that safe laboratory where you come to practice. That's what sets us apart from going to a program that somebody's offering. You go sit in a classroom for a day, you come out with a head full of knowledge of how to do a presentation, how to be a leader, you know all the terms, and you walk out and you never look at it again. You put the binder on the shelf and you go about your business the way you always have. The change because of those programs are very small, unless you're super focused, and the odd person will go out and really get focused and apply themselves and develop a skill. But Toastmasters actually puts us in that environment every week, and we're required to build that skill, and that makes it super valuable. So we've got that leadership skill and leadership training. Teamwork is a huge part of any Toastmasters program. And so this is another transferable skill that we can talk about that people learn and practice in Toastmasters. Think of the impact on the corporation when people learn to work together, where people learn to acknowledge that Ted is different than Pat and Heidi is different than Ted. And we all bring strengths that are different, and together we can work and be strong and united. So we get to practice that in Toastmasters, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully, but we get to practice teamwork. Feedback skills is another transferable skill for the workplace. And again, this goes into that role we play in terms of meeting the needs of our potential customer. Feedback skills applies to anybody that has a staff member, if you're a supervisor, a manager, a vice president, a CEO, you've got staff. You've got people that work with you and for you, and you're providing feedback all the time. So this is critical. And I find that when I talk to corporations that I really emphasize our management, our entry-level management up to our senior managers really needing feedback skills. So, and in addition to that, the listening skills that go with that. So we teach listening skills and critical thinking skills as well, which you don't see advertised anywhere, but you can get it into Toastmasters. We have interpersonal communication, which I mentioned. We also teach people to set and manage goals and strategic planning. And this happens through our Distinguished Club plan. When we set the plan for the year, that's strategic planning. And then we have goals that are inside that plan, and we work to achieve them. So that's a transferable skill directly to the workplace, directly to the work people are doing, that's going to have a positive impact in that environment. So as you could see, we could go on for quite a while here to look at the transferable skills. But when you find out what they're looking for, it's very rare when we can't offer them some form of what they're looking for. So be curious about what they need so that we can meet their needs. I want to talk a bit about how we can support. And I want to talk to this topic from the perspective of being a district, being leaders in the district, and how can we actually support those Toastmasters programs that are in corporations. What do they need? Well, let's look at it for a moment from the perspective of why are so many of them unsuccessful, or why have we lost so many early in their lifetime? Those baby Toastmasters that are created often die of neglect or isolation, in my experience. So isolation means that they don't go to outside events. They're just a club or a program inside that corporation, and they don't know that anything else exists. They only see the little micro dot of what the Toastmasters program really is, and they fail to learn or be told or be exposed to the idea that we're global, that we have so many layers of opportunity in this organization if they're exposed to the entire organization. So that's our responsibility as Toastmasters. If we're going in to develop that up front, we need to let them know about that global organization, about the area and division and district, international events where there growth and opportunities to learn and be exposed to the world stage can become larger at each level. It's what keeps people engaged. I would not still be in Toastmasters if I wouldn't have discovered the district outside of my club. I would have died of boredom to just be in my club. After 5 years, I'd be running for the door. But fortunately for me, I found the district and I went, oh my gosh, there's so many people I can learn things from. And we need to bring that to the corporate programs so that they see that and they can benefit from it. So it's important to set them up ahead of time to let them know that not all the learning that they may want to do as leaders is going to happen within the work hours, but they may have to go to events outside of work hours to get that training. Just like you and I have in our education, we go and do what it takes to get what we need as leaders. And so let's set them up for success. When we have them aware of what's going on, let's talk about leadership training with them in a different way. Let's let them know that there is leadership training that happens at events that are called club officer training. And there's a special event there for the executive of that program when they're from the corporate world, they go to training that's focused right for them so that they get something of benefit that's applicable to their Toastmaster experience. Most of them, if they're set up with HR and training departments sending employees to their training event, they're not going to have a VP of membership that's doing the things that a VP of membership in a community club are doing. It's a different world. They're going to be running that program quite differently than a community club is run. So we need to make sure that what we're giving them at the COT and the TLI events are relevant to their world. So we, again, need to support them and put that in place for them. Let them know up front that there's going to be these events that they're required to attend as the leaders in that program. So that requires also that the district looks seriously at what do we offer the corporates? Do we have a corporate training event where they can come and talk about their challenges and get some ideas and resolve them and go back stronger and build it stronger? Do we reach out as district to the corporations to make sure that it's running well and that they know that we exist? We know that many corporate clubs do not take time during the work week. They do not ask them to pay. And so we're virtually invisible in the workplace. And so how can we be visible so that we get the support of people being sent to the Toastmasters program without us running around trying to fill the program? So it's a paradigm shift that we're looking for when the district comes to support. The district's plans really, as we support the corporate environment, really look at how do we train the sponsors and mentors of corporates. When we're sending sponsors and mentors in to create a corporate program for Toastmasters, do they talk the language of the corporation? Do they understand the transferable skills for the corporation? Do they understand the support that the corporate Toastmasters program will need and will want? And so, and are they there long enough to make sure that this new baby Toastmasters group is going to be sustainable? I have a bias. I'll declare it up front. My bias is that a sponsor stays for 6 months minimum, and a mentor stays for a year minimum. If we want these babies to grow up and thrive, we have to support them and teach them how to be sustainable. And that requires people to be there that are experienced and comfortable in that environment. So sponsors and mentors, important to train. It also brings us to that point of if we need a coach to go into one of those programs, the same information is required. Do they understand the corporation? Do they understand the language? Do they understand how we would meet their needs? Do they get the idea of us not doing everything but partnering with the corporation? We basically take the curriculum. And so looking at our club coaches, sorry, I lost the word there, our coaches when they go in to work to rebuild those Toastmasters in the corporate world. Working down that whole list of people that need to understand that are going to touch that Toastmasters group in the corporate world. What about our area and division directors? Are they asking for things that don't even happen in that corporate culture? And how do they adapt? We hear, oh, we can't get in, or they meet during the day, so we can't go. That doesn't mean that we can't visit them. We have online all the time now. We have telephones that still work. We have many, many ways of connecting to get a sense of what's going on in that program and get a report from them. So I encourage you to look at all those levels of the organization and how to support them. And I think that, and I believe from my experience, that it builds a stronger Toastmasters presence in those corporations. Of course, without saying, your PQD and your CGD and your district director all understand how it works and are familiar with that and able to step in at any time to support as well. The other thing that is very useful, and I've seen this created in a number of districts, I haven't been part of one yet that's done this, but to have a corporate liaison as part of the district team. And so that this person would be responsible to have a team that would actually look at training those sponsors and mentors and coaches, getting the area and division directors online with what the corporate Toastmasters looks like in your district, and do all that groundwork, even leading the charge into the corporations. They may have the list of the corporations. They may be comfortable phoning and making that first contact, working with the current club growth director, however that works in your district. But it's just one more person that can be available as a liaison between the district and your corporate programs so that you know what's happening. So I think that there's a number of items that I've mentioned that can be put in place by the district, and other ones that I may not even have mentioned today that you could put in place that would support the district and those clubs being successful from the corporations. We know isolation, lack of knowledge of the Toastmasters organization, certainly the processes that take place in a yearly calendar of Toastmasters are complex and challenging for people that don't know the jargon or the processes. Even having elections when you're in an education program. Why are we having elections in a program I'm taking? So to understand what's the learning in that. You know, it's an opportunity for leaders to step up, identify, prepare campaign speeches. All of that can be identified as transferable skills again. So I'll just want to leave that right now. And in terms of the roles that we play, and I've got about 10 minutes left, I believe, maybe a bit, maybe 5 minutes. And I just want to see if there's any questions on what I've covered so far. And if we can open up the chat, that would be great. Or if anybody wants to ask vocally.
Hello, Pat. How are you doing?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Justin. I'm in Dublin. Yes, I work with a number of corporations. I'm just curious as to what is the ideal scenario, because, for example, I know a couple of people in a company called Irish Life. They're a larger organisation in Dublin and Ireland, and one of the guys there is a Toastmaster member, and he set up a corporate club there, right, just by inviting them into a lunch and learn session, and then it developed as a lunchtime meeting. I believe some other organisations, corporate organisations, start from that basis. Is that the best way in which we get into the corporations, or is there an alternative blueprint in which you would advise?
That's not my choice. I think we set them up. If we do it that way, we set them up as a club that's on the side, and it has to squeeze in at lunch on people's time, and that it's not valued. The organization doesn't even know we're there after 2 weeks or 3 weeks or maybe a month. And so, no, that's not the way I prefer to do it. I believe that one of the principles that I hold on to all the time is that we want to begin as we intend to continue. And so for me, I want to have it not as a free lunch and learn where they come during their own time. I want to sell it to the corporation as a mainstream training event that's in their calendar of training, that's treated the very same way their anti-discriminatory trainings handled, the same way their project management, the same way as their software training. However they promote any training internally, this is how Toastmasters is listed, and that's how they sign up. Because if we do it like a speechcraft, or we do a lunch and learn, then we often have one person in that workplace who's now Miss Toastmaster, and Pat's running around trying to find people to come to a program. That's, in my experience, in the environments that I've worked in my career, that's not how we go to education at work. We don't go to a course that's a career development course because our friend captures us in the hallway and talks us into going. We usually go because our supervisors in our review process said this would be a great skill building tool for you, or we asked to go because it would be great building. So yeah, I would do it differently if I had a choice in it, for sure. Thanks for the question. I see a couple in the chat monitor. It says from Paul, question, which are the districts in Region 10 which have been most successful setting and sustaining corporates, best practices we can learn from? You know what, off the top of my head, because it's 4 o'clock in the morning here, I can't answer that question. Paul, I can't tell you off the top of my head. District 91, for example, has a huge proportion of corporate clubs. And I don't know how they're built, if they're built as programs within the corporation, or if they're built and they're actually community clubs that are just situated inside a corporation. When I talk about corporate clubs, I'm talking about clubs that are really that they're for the employees of a specific organization. And so it's not totally in alignment with how Toastmasters International currently defines them. So they talk about that it could be an open corporate club, and that gets more complex because then if you're just advertising and sending people, it's not as neat. So anyway, I won't go down that anymore. So Paul, probably talked to 91. They've got the most, as far as I know. When changing our language, how do we deal with the cultural clash when the corporate members engage with the community of Toastmasters in the district? Samir, I think, thank you. And thank you for your earlier presentation and story about your journey through the corporate. I didn't see you still on here, so I didn't recognize you. I think that I basically talk about that there's community and there's corporate, and we have the same program, but they're set up differently to meet different needs. And see, I think the challenge that we've created in Toastmasters is we've grown everything organically. And so we had Toastmaster community clubs, and then suddenly people are saying, oh, this should be in my workplace. And so Pat takes Toastmasters into her workplace, and Pat creates another community club where Pat's recruiting all the people, and Pat's got Evelyn working with her to collect the dues to get paid. And then Mary's running around making sure everybody's signed up for the education. And we continued to do that instead of going, wait, just a minute, that's not how it works in the corporate world. And changing the model, which is what I'm proposing and have been talking about now for over 10 years, to change the model when we go in the corporation, so we have a better chance of it surviving and thriving. So hopefully that helps. I just talk about community and corporate. If the district has community outreach and corporate outreach, we have retention in corporate and community. They're two different animals, really. How would you suggest we raise awareness of Toastmasters among local businesses or corporations? Number of different ways, Danny. First of all, I was present at a summit. They called it a corporate summit, and when I was in Southern Africa, and they invited some of the higher ranking officials from the corporations who already had Toastmasters internally and had good results. They invited them to an evening. They also invited some other leaders from corporations who didn't have Toastmasters. And so I was there as president of Toastmasters, and I spoke and talked about the benefits. Some of the district members spoke at that time, and a couple of the corporate leaders that had Toastmasters also spoke. And it was a very powerful testimonial of what works and the benefit of Toastmasters. That's the people they'll listen to. And I think that that's one way that I would suggest doing it. So I'm out of time. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions. This is a huge topic because the first challenge is to change your paradigm and then look at the roles that we play in an entirely different way to meet the needs, to know our audience, and to support our brand new Toastmasters that will come on board who now work in corporations. I return control to our chair, Evelyn.